Hey everybody, it's Mike, and this is not a regular episode of Chip Damage. No, this is a thank you to all of you, my viewers, my subscribers, and everyone else who's watching this. It is a thank you for helping me reach the recent milestone of 1,000 subscribers, which is a goal I was never quite sure I'd reach, and definitely not as quickly as I have reached it. So, in gratitude for all of you for helping me reach this, for making this possible, I wanted to have a discussion about why I started collecting, why I started this channel, who I am, and where I hope to take this channel in the future, and some future ideas that I have going forward. And the reason I'm doing this is because my favorite part of this channel that I've learned is the discussion, the comments, the responses, the other ideas that people have brought to me. Just by putting out a collection and someone suggesting something new or giving me a new perspective on it because they're from a different area or different era, they're a different age than I am. That's my favorite part. It really keeps me doing this. So in response to that, I wanted to give all of you who've been watching me for the last couple of months an idea of where this is going, where it comes from, and I hope you'll enjoy it and learn something new too. Because like I said, my favorite thing about doing all this is learning new things. So without further ado, let's begin. My name is Mike. If you didn't figure that part out now, yeah, that is my name. And I've been into, for lack of a better term, nerdy things my whole life. I'm part of the nerd culture. Now, let me be frank. I'm not a huge fan of that term nerd. Like that's an easy and quick way to describe what all of this is all about, gaming, anime, comic books, what have you. But that's not really how I describe myself, but it is an easy word that rolls off the tongue. And it's kind of generally accepted in the vernacular, like, oh, it's a nerd culture. Like IGN covers nerd culture. I've always kind of thought of it as like the alternative, right? Like I have alternative hobbies. More mainstream things like pop music and professional sports, like that's more mainstream. Nothing wrong with those. But like the alternatives are like, toy collecting or, anime or video games. It's always kind of been the other choices. And you can like all those things, but that's just how in my brain I categorize those hobbies. But regardless, I've been to that all my life. So from the very beginning, some of people have guessed this from the way I talk already, that I am from the East Coast of the United States. I'm originally from New Jersey. And the person that's gotten me into all of this, the person I have to thank for who I am is, of course, my mother. My mother came to the United States when she was a young girl, and one of the ways she learned how to speak and read English was comic books. She read Lois Lane comic books as a young girl growing up, and that led her into reading other things like as she got older, like Stephen King and horror novels and fantasy novels and sci-fi novels. So by the time I came around, by the time I was born, that was the norm. Like I had those books and comics around the house in the attic, stored all around to begin with. So that was kind of my gateway into thinking that fantasy and the fantastic and sci-fi were the norm. And from there, it just blossomed. By the time I was born, the NES was already around, and I had my older brother had one, and my older cousins had one. I got to play that a ton. But my first video game console, and where this all kind of began, was the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive for my international homies out there. But man, that was just the start of everything. That was my first console. I love that thing to death. And I believe the first game I had on it was Miss Pac-Man and Vector Man a little later on. But in Sonic 1, of course, my older brother gave me. But how I think the roots of my collecting began was that, hey, we never had a ton of money. I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm almost proud of that. We were, definitely on the lower end of the lower middle class. But my parents were gracious enough, or, I was lucky enough to receive a Sega Genesis. And my parents said, hey, this is expensive. The games are expensive. Everything is expensive. If you break it, you're not getting another one. And that kind of instilled in me the OCD that I still have today with preservation, with keeping things, kind of in a good state and, not wasting money. And it continued as such throughout my childhood and my younger adult years. I got into video games, and because of my mother, comic books. There was always a sci-fi movie on, Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel, DC, and that led, of course, I grew up in the age of Toonami with Dragon Ball Z, and she was so cool. If I was watching something like Rurouni Kenshin or Dragon Ball Z or Yu Yu Hakusho on TV, and she just happened to walk by the room and thought it looked cool, she would sit down right next to me and watch it for a bit. I'm like, Mom, you really want to watch this? Like, she's like, yeah, this looks cool. I'll watch it with you for a bit. And I'll never forget, she watched the near the entirety of Full Metal Alchemist with me growing up when it was first aired in the United States, just because she liked it, just because, she wanted to watch a show with her son. So I thank her for that. And, I was lucky enough to have tons of friends growing up that had the alternate consoles than I did. Of course, I was a Sega kid. I got the Saturn, the Dreamcast, but I had my best friend who lived across the street, like movie style, had the Super Nintendo and the N64 growing up. My other buddy had a PlayStation. There was never like a rivalry, like maybe a slight silent rivalry, what was best, but I got exposed to all these things and I just grew to love it all. Even if I couldn't play it or buy it myself, a friend would have it. And, I think that's many kids' experiences. Like, you would get one game and your friend would get another. So it was until I was in college and I got a job at a major US game retailer. And you can probably guess the one. It's that one. And I worked there for about 4 years. And, that's not a great job in a lot of ways. And be nice to those cashiers, especially that job could be pretty rough. Be nice to all cashiers. Any cashier job is very rough. My fellow people who are in retail, like it can really wear on you. But regardless, I was there for 4 years, and that was during the peak of the Xbox 360, PS3, Wii, PSP, and DS era, where gaming was really booming and going out into not only just its core audience, but the mainstream with things like motion control and the DS and the Kinect. So and this was a store that was very close to New York City, so we had a lot of traffic. And though we were busy, my favorite thing about it is I made lifelong friends there from the employees and some customers, but it put me in contact with tons of gamers that could recommend me games that I never would have tried or heard of before. And because I worked in this store that had high volume, I had access to many of those games relatively easy, and that's where my collecting really blossomed. I would hear about a game and I would try it, and if I liked it, I bought it, and it was just right there, and I had easy access to it. And for 4 years, that's how it went on. And after college, I was able to luckily and get a job that allowed me to travel and have the financial freedom to continue collecting, which I'm very, very, very grateful for. And that's what I spent the last 10 years kind of doing, from game collecting, toy collecting, anime collecting, comic book collecting, and I was able to travel to many great events throughout the years. I've been to San Diego Comic-Con, I've been to New York Comic-Con, I've been to E3, I've been to Japan, and I've been to mainland Asia. And my favorite part about all of that is at all of these conventions or at any gathering is meeting the people. Like, yeah, I love going to like an artist alley in a con and actually buying merchandise or getting a comic book, but talking to the creators or talking to the other enthusiasts, the other fans, hearing their story, their take, like, hey, what's the scene like in Texas? What's the scene like in South America? What's the scene like in Europe or Japan? And it gives you a broader scope of what's going on. I love that. It's part of the collecting, right? I'm collecting experiences. And I know that sounds so odd, but that's my favorite part about it. It just goes, wow, so that's what it's like there. How interesting. It's so different than what I thought it was like or what it's like in my local environment. And that continued on for years and years. And that kind of brings me to why I collect. Let's start with the big one with gaming. Gaming, like I said, I've loved ever since I was a kid, but why not emulation? I could do a whole video on my thoughts on emulation and piracy and all that stuff. Well, number one, I like physically collecting games because of the obvious that I've said before and that many collectors have said. It's physical, it's in your hands, and sure, some discs rot if not properly cared for, it goes corrupted, but it is harder to lose a physical thing than a digital thing. It's in your hands. It's very hard for anyone to take that away. And for many game collectors, especially with older games, it's not just the cartridge or the disc that you're getting. You're getting the manual, you're getting the case, you're getting the artwork, and that's part of it. That really is. It's a special part, and that's why so many collectors don't just collect discs or cartridges. It's the artwork. It's sometimes they put the little, nuanced descriptions of characters or their backstories in the manual. Like, that's great to have. And as a personal note, I like having them as conversation pieces. Like how many people have books, like leather-bound books on the shelf. I love having a ton of games on my shelf because I have other friends come over and they bring new people who are gamers and they go, they see my shelf and they go, oh, wow, you have that game? Could we play it? Like they'll see something obscure that they grew up with or they've never had the chance to play, and it's right there and we have a connection. And that's what it's all about. It's about connecting. I'm like, oh, you want to play Typing of the Day and on the Sega Dreamcast? Hell yeah, we could play that. I'll hook that up right now. Let's go all night. And that's why I like collecting physically. Now, of course, I'll download digital games if it's my only option. And of course, I believe in the next 10 to 20 years, it'll probably be all digital, but I'm going to enjoy physical as long as I can and get those on my shelf for reasons like that. Now, the other thing I want to address is piracy, like I mentioned. Now, I used to have very strong feelings on piracy, like, no, it's bad, you're stealing, and that's not how the games were meant to be played, blah, blah, blah. And, that was me in my youth. But the fact of the matter is, I am very privileged in order to be able to buy all the games that I want. That's fact number one. Gaming is expensive, and if people really want to play a game and they can't afford it, especially an older game, who am I to say, no, you shouldn't play that because you can't afford it? And number two, piracy is only stealing if it's a brand new game. If it's something that's on the shelves right now or on the digital storefront. No one is getting money from a 20-year-old game. And so while I do not encourage emulation, piracy, I understand that it is another form of game preservation in of itself. Physical collectors preserve their games by actually having them, putting them on their shelves and making sure that they're safe. But like things that will never get re-released or are very hard to find, licensed games as it were, they can only be found or played again in newer formats by emulation. So who am I to say run out and buy a Sega Genesis so you could play Tiny Toons, but if you can get it on your computer. Now, I understand that they are nebulous things. One of the things I don't like about emulation is, those can be pulled and often are. And those game creators have every right to pull that. That is their product, they made it. And even if they're not making money off it anymore, it is their right as something they made to take it down. And I can't argue with them. And also, a lot of the time, emulation, it doesn't feel quite right. Sometimes they're fantastic, and it's getting better as years goes on. But I prefer to play games as they were originally intended, with the controller on the couch with the TV, the tube TV, whatever that definition, blah, 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 save states. So yeah, there's so many people out there all like, oh, why do you spend all the money on these rare games when you can just emulate? I'm like, well, I like to have the product. I'm lucky enough to be able to afford the product, and it's mine. I can say it's mine, and I don't disregard what you're saying. I would never encourage anyone to emulate or pirate a brand new game, because that is taking away. I've always considered buying new games as a vote. If a little indie game comes out, not only are you supporting the industry and that developer by buying their game, you're giving them a vote saying, like, hey, I like this enough, or this is good enough for me to put my money on. Please keep making more of this. And piracy and emulation take away from that, from new games at the very least. So that is the reason why I love collecting games. And also, just like I was a history major. I love the history of things. It's so great to have all these games on a shelf. Devil May Cry 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just watch how it evolves. See the names of creators come and go. Like, oh, this guy was like, just the artist in the beginning, like Nomura in Final Fantasy VII, and then he ends up being like the creator of Kingdom Hearts and directing so many great titles later on. I love watching the progression. And one thing that I think many game collectors, how they differentiate themselves from other gamers, is that they can go back and forth so easily. They can play, new games, old games. They're all good games, and that's something I hold strongly. So that's why I collect video games. Now, onto my other hobby that I've made many videos on, toy collecting. Now, I wasn't huge into toy collecting until about 10 years ago when a friend really introduced me to it, because number one, you need space for toys. Like, you need to kind of have a big enough space to have them. But as I got older, I started to realize, as this friend introduced me to toy collecting, number one, obviously, these things are work of art. In the culture we have today, game toys from anime, toys from video games, like when someone makes them, they're usually, made by fans in a lot of circumstances who grew up and got into the toy industry. They're beautiful, the way they're crafted, some of these. Like you start to realize what's good art and what's bad art when it comes to the toys. Like, oh, the clothing looks good, the hair looks good, and they're just great to appreciate. But the number two, the real reason I like to collect toys is that they're physical reminders of stories that I love. It's like, if you have, let's just say, for an example, a Superman statue in your house, when you're having a bad day, you're feeling a little blue, you need a little motivation, maybe you'll see that figure in the corner of your eye, and it'll help you get through the day. It'll remind you of a story that you read to help you get through the day, and that's a very real thing. Let me tell you something about myself. Growing up until I was 19 years old, I was very, very heavy set. When I was 17 years old, 18 years old, I was 254 pounds. I was a pretty chunky kid. And eventually, I decided that that wasn't the route I wanted to go down. And there's nothing wrong with anyone's image, but with being that way, but that wasn't the route I wanted to go down for health reasons specifically. So I decided to get in shape to lose some weight. And, a couple years later, when in 2017, I ran the New York Marathon in 3 hours and 15 minutes. I got pretty damn good. I got pretty good, damn athletic. I did it all on my own. And you know how I trained for that? You know how for many years I trained for that? I listened to Naruto music every day while working out or running. I listened to the Kill la Kill soundtrack. I listened to the Dragon Ball Z soundtrack, or I'd watch a movie that got me hyped. And so, yeah, like those reminders can greatly motivate you to better yourself. I lost 90 pounds because I was really inspired by Gurren Lagann, because I wanted to be like superheroes that I grew up admiring. I wanted to have their willpower like Batman or Spider-Man. So those reminders are very real to me at the very least. And I think they are to a lot of people. I like having that little reminder. Much like how a song can motivate you, just the visual image of a figure there reminds you like, man, I love it. And I love supporting stuff like that too. These works of art that could remind people of great stories and times that they have experienced. But that brings me to my next thing. Why do I collect comic books? Well, that's something I haven't really covered too much on the channel, but yeah, I love them all, baby. I love Marvel, I love DC. These are great. And why do I collect them? Because who can throw out a book? That's just sacrilege. But as the years have gone on, I've loved new Marvel and new DC, Image Comics, some indies. And yet again, conversation pieces. These are all conversation pieces. These books, when someone sees them on the shelf, like, oh, you're this fan, you're that fan. Same thing with toys. Someone sees an anime figure of mine, like, oh, you got a Vasta Stampede. We got to talk about Trigun. Oh, you're a Spider-Man fan. What's your favorite artist or era? What's your favorite movie? It's all about that connection. It's all about with all of these, just bringing people together and having that icebreaker, because that's what people often just need to make new friends or make new connections. And I just love the hell out of that. And I've realized going through life, at least where I am now, up to this point, it's one of the best ways that I talk to people, that I encounter people, that I make that connection through having this stuff around and people kind of seeing who I am. The inside of my house is kind of like the inside of my head. I got my toys over there, my games, each kind of departments of my personality that people can kind of see. And that's my favorite thing about collecting all this stuff. And lastly, I've mentioned it many times, I'm a huge anime fan. And that's probably the strangest ones that people wrap their head around. Like, why do you physically buy anime DVDs or VHSs or Blu-rays? Well, that is an old one. I mean, back when I was a kid, getting an anime VHS or DVD, it was like treasure. You'd find them, you'd barely find them anywhere unless you were near a Suncoast or a Sam Goody. If, some of my old OGs on the East Coast or in the United States remember those. Like, they were expensive, so when you got one, they were special, because anime, when it aired on TV, unless you taped it, it was gone. And if you wanted to watch it again, you had to either wait, or you had to go online and like on a LimeWire or Kazaa or Morpheus and download like a poorly subbed like bad version. So if you got like a DVD or a VHS of it that looked better than that, it's great to have, and that kind of spurred it. But in the modern age, why do I buy anime? And well, yet again, it's part of my vote. I've always considered that. Yet again, like with gaming, when you buy an anime, it's a vote. Your dollar is a vote, like to tell the creators, hey, keep localizing this, keep translating it, bring it to the US, keep making it. I know it's not a lot of money and it's silly. Like, whatever I give them is inconsequential, but it's all I can do to support it. And I want to do that. So I will continue to do that. And it's great to have that DVD, that Blu-ray, yet again, that bookshelf argument. Someone comes into the house and, oh, you like this? Let's talk about it. Let's watch this. It's nice to have it physically, because you know what? Streaming sites and downloading are fantastic. They can all go away. They can all get pulled down, the power, whatever. You could cancel your subscription. But no, I'll have that DVD as long as it physically lasts. And that's probably going to be a lot longer than some of these streaming services. So yeah, that's why I love it. I just love having them right there and like, what will I watch today? Whoop, pop it in. And that brings me to what I wanted to talk about next, which is why I started this channel. With all these hobbies that I have, all this nerd culture spinning around my head, the alternative. Of course, I love YouTubers. I love gaming YouTubers. Some of my favorites are, Maximilian Dude, Kyle Bossman of the Easy Allies, Matt McMuscles, some call me Johnny, Austin Eruption, Stop Skeletons from Fighting, and a myriad of, ones like Variant Comics, and Comics Explained, and tons like that. And I love them all, and I really respect those guys. I never intend to reach heights like those, but the reason I wanted to start this was most of those are very specialized. Most of those guys are the best at what they do. But I believe that if you're into gaming, you're probably into some of these other hobbies, or at least somewhat interested in them. So I started this channel to talk about my collection, my experiences, like what's rare, what's good, what's bad, and kind of maybe introduce people to some new things outside of gaming adjacent. Like, hey, if you like the Naruto games, or, you should watch the anime, or vice versa, what have you. And, so I'll put out a video on a toy or a game. And even if it's not necessarily something that you're into, and that's fine if it is, you can just pass over it and God bless. But if it is, and you give it a click and you're like, you know what, that sounds interesting, I'll at least give that a shot. I would be honored if that's it. Like, you came to the channel for gaming, but you ended up buying a toy or checking out a toy, or at least thinking about it because of that. That's the greatest thing I could achieve. That's the greatest honor I have. Like, well, I clicked this because I'm more of a toy collector, but Mike was talking about, this Daredevil figure, so I decided to go read a Daredevil comic book. I'm not much of a comic book guy, like purchasing guy, but, I gave it a shot and I liked it. That's the highest honor, to kind of crisscross all these things, to pull them all together, because I think, like everyone else, I have a pretty unique experience and perspective on things. And one thing I just don't see in a lot of other channels is kind of that thatching. And they always say you should specialize, your videos. Like, that was the number one tip. Like, oh, pick a goal and stick with it. Like, but that's not how I am. If you haven't noticed, I'm pretty scatterbrained. Everything I've ever done here is not scripted. I shoot this all on an iPhone, which, by the way, I hope to increase the quality of later and start doing voiceover for video and adding gameplay to gameplay things. But I just want to talk about the stuff I enjoy, because I think that's how most people are. No one just has one particular hobby, and I kind of want to bring that all together. And I want the ultimate goal, something I learned while making some of those earlier videos, was I want to collect experiences. I want to hear your comments. I want to hear what you think of this, or how it was released in your country, or your part of this country. How you're introduced to this. And I want other people to see those comments and comment on them, and just create something of a YouTube discussion community. And, that's my ultimate goal. So moving forward, that's what I'll be doing. You'll be seeing more videos, of course, on collecting video games and toys, but I'm going to start doing comics as well, do more on anime. I know people are asking about that anime part 2 video. I'm working on it. I'm going to try to make higher production videos, because now I know I have something of an audience to engage with, and move on from there. And like I said, I've been lucky enough to encounter many people and live in an area where it's pretty easy to find comic book shops, arcades, anime shops, toy shops, and I've made friends with many of the people who own them. I would love to travel there and make little videos about why you should check this place out, why you should check this place out, bring them business, and maybe introduce you guys to a new thing you should check out. So please look forward to those as I go on. And as I do this, please, I'm not thin-skinned. Us Jersey boys are used to a little bit of abuse. If you don't like what you're seeing, let me know. I'd love to keep everything as positive as possible, but critique is important. I take it to heart, and I'll do my best to make content that you like. Because fundamentally, I'm having a ton of fun doing this, but I want you guys to have a ton of fun watching this as well. So yeah, that's my hopes for the future. Just to have a channel that brings together all the nerddom, all the alternative kind of medias of, video games and comic books, anime, toy collecting, movies, what have you. And maybe cover some of the news that comes along with that. I've already done that for things like E3s and Nintendo Directs, and I'll never be at the level of stature like somebody like Easy Allies, who are so professional and fantastic, or Maximilian, who's so charming. But I love talking about it, and it won't necessarily be about a new product, but hey, this was announced today. Let's talk about this. I want to hear your thoughts about it, and maybe it'll change my mind. Like, they announced this dumb game. I'm not interested in this. Like, Mike, maybe you should check this out. I'm a big fan of the series, and this is why it's good. It's got double jumps, and it's really flashy. I'm like, okay, that's it. If a game's got a good double jump, I'm usually in it for the ride. So please look forward to that. And thank you for all the support that you've already given me, because I got to tell you, I can't believe that I'll put out a video and the next day I'll have 10 comments and I'll try to respond to them as quickly as I can. And we'll get into a discussion and I'll learn a new game to check out. Like I bought Rhythm Heaven recently because a couple of people kept recommending Rhythm Heaven on the Wii collection. So, and you know, please correct me whenever I'm wrong. Whenever I'm wrong, please let me know, because I'm only human. Even when I do as much research as possible with all the knowledge that I have, I'll make mistakes, and I want to know when I'm wrong, and I will thank you personally for correcting me. I will respond to that comment. Don't think you're being rude, but yeah, so that's it. That's my spiel. That's my shtick. That's what I want this to be. And yet again, I'm so grateful that I'm able to talk to at least 1,000 of you out there after passing this milestone. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. I hope we have a ton of fun in the future as I continue to make videos. I hope I get better and better and you can enjoy them more. Please let me know if they're not getting better. But I want you to know how eternally grateful that I am that you'll all tune in and watch a guy who films everything on an iPhone, unedited and unscripted, and engage with me. So thank you for that. Have a great night. As always, this has been Chip Damage. My name is Mike, and let's have some fun together. Take care.